Menus and scene management in Unity. To start, I have an empty Unity project. I'm going to proceed through multiple steps during this video. At first, I'm going to create some new UI, a text and a button. Then we're going to work on a script to load different scenes, create a second scene, open that scene up, create a text and Unity game objects in that scene, and then show how using LoadScene, the method as part of scene management, we can navigate using menus between two different scenes. So let's start by making those UI game objects. So in Unity, there's two different approaches to creating game objects. I can either right-click and go down to UI and text, or of course, click the little plus under the hierarchy right here and go to UI and text. I'm going to go ahead and do now. Adding a text game object will automatically add a canvas game object, of which it is now a child, and also add an event system game object, allowing us to interact with events. So we have our text game object. Now by default, the main camera is focused on this little area right here. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom out in Windows using the scroll wheel. I can scroll back and zoom out, and as we see, new text is way over here. I'm going to zoom out and then right-click and drag, and then with new text right here, text selected, new text, come over and change its font size. 14 is pretty small. So I'm going to create this significantly bigger and set it at 75, and change this from new text to game menu. Notice once I did that, it doesn't show it anymore. It just shows this little loading icon. So I'm going to click and drag this over, scroll out some more using my scroll wheel, right-click and drag this over, scroll out some more, scroll out here, and then make this significantly bigger by, notice the rectangle tool is selected, dragging this until I can see game menu. There we go. Now make its box roughly the same size as the text, and then clicking on this, click and drag it around, and I'm going to arrange it on this grid to roughly right there, so it's roughly in the middle of the screen and then slightly above. I can verify that by going over to the game preview and seeing game menu is roughly right there, and I can arrange my screen by right-clicking and dragging and making sure I'm looking at roughly the same thing. So our text so far shows game menu, and that's good, but we also need to interact with something. We want to create a menu of sorts. Right now, we've just got kind of a title, game menu. So I'm going to create a new button. Again, two different approaches to creating things within Unity. You can either go to the plus symbol and drop down, or right-click, go to UI, go to button. Notice the button was automatically added to the canvas. Even if canvas was not selected, it would be automatically added, just like when we added a new text game object, it automatically added a canvas to host all of the UI game objects. So now we have a button with its text that says button. We can verify this by noticing that right here, button, the parent of another game object called text. If I click on this, I notice it says button here and it says button over here. So I'm just going to change this right here and write credits. And notice it update this button over here. So with button selected over here, I can click left click, that is, and drag it around. And I think right there is pretty good. I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger. Maybe drag it down to about right there. And I want to see what it looks like over here in the preview. And yeah, that looks pretty good for now. So far, we have a credits button, that is a button with the text credits on it, and we have the beginnings of a game menu with text up here saying game menu. Now, we need to add some scripting in order to be able to do anything with these game objects. So you may notice with button selected, it has over here in the inspector view, listing all of its components, something called OnClick, and it says list is empty. We're going to write some code here in just a second, and then add it to this component and use it to interact with this. So when it's clicked, it's going to do something. But first, we've got to write some code. So with button selected over here in the hierarchy view, over here in the inspector view, I'm going to come down and add a new component, and I'm going to add a new scripting component. So I'm going to scroll to the very bottom, new script. And then sometimes this title right here gets stuck. So if we click in the search, we press right twice or sometimes down twice to navigate between the search and over here. I'm going to call this new script NavigateMenu. This is going to be a script shared across two different scenes as an asset. Either scene will be able to access it, and either scene will be able to use it to load the other scene, which will make sense when we get into the code. So I've called this NavigateMenu, and I'm going to click Create and Add. So this added a new script component to right here, the inspector view of this button. Now that it's updated, NavigateMenu was the name I gave it, and also added it over here, part of an assets because it is a file. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on it, the C# file. There we go, double click. Visual Studio is going to open. We'll give it just a second to load everything for us. It's going to create a project and file. We'll give it just a minute or two to do all that. Okay. So now that it's ready, we're going to do something a little bit strange. If we're working with any other game object, we might care about its start method or its update method. In this case, we actually don't care about either of those. So I'm going to go ahead and erase all of them right here. And I'm going to add a new method. So I'm going to make this public void, and I'm going to call this switch scene. So I'm going to describe what this does. Open and close parentheses and open and close curly brackets, and press enter to let Visual Studio space it for me. So this is called switch scene. Now I'm going to give it a parameter that is a string called scene name. This will become important here in just a second. So what I want to be able to do is I want to have this method called switch scene. I want to tell it the name of a scene, and then I want to have it load that scene. And this will allow us to share the script across multiple scenes and allow those scenes and those game objects to access the same script and then just supply the argument they want to load that scene. Now, unfortunately, the scene management functionality is not automatically added to a file when we just create a new script file, which means we need to add that namespace. So we add new namespaces in C# files with the using keyword. So right now we have systems collections, system collections generic, and Unity engine. I'm going to add another one called using Unity engine. I can spell engine correctly. There we go. Dot scene management. So notice it selects, I started typing S and it says, okay, do you mean scene management? And I do. I press enter and then a semicolon to stop that line right there. So using Unity.SceneManagement, that will allow us access to various data types and functionality to allow us to manipulate scenes, to load them and do other things. So down here now in switch scene, I want to call scene manager. Notice right here, it found it for me, scene management at runtime. And I'm going to use this object to call one of its methods called load scene right here. And now I'm going to pass it scene name. And I'm going to put a semicolon at the end of this. So the switch scene method is going to accept a single parameter, scene name, which is going to immediately pass to scene manager in its method called load scene. This is going to allow us to, again, across multiple scenes, to just write a single script file that can be used in multiple places, and then for us to add the argument we want, loading either, as we'll see very shortly, game or menu or credits or however else we want to approach this. Before we can do anything else, we've got to actually save this file. So again, multiple approaches to doing things. If we're using Windows, we can go Control S to save this. If we were in Mac, it would be Command S. Or if we want, we could also just go to File, Save as well, and that would also save that file. Right here, Save Assets right here, Control S, the same thing. Okay, this file is saved. We're done with the coding in Visual Studio. Let's move back to Unity. So move back to Unity. We'll give it just a second to load everything back up, the code we just changed. Okay. So I'm going to click on this button right here, representing this credits button. And then notice this down here, this OnClick thing. I'm going to click the plus sign, add to list. I'm going to make sure this says runtime only to specify I only want this when the game is running. Now notice it says none and in parentheses object. That lets us know that this only works with a game object, something that is an object. script files as components are not game objects. So this part's going to seem a little bit weird, but the functionality only works with game objects. So we have NavigateMenu as a script component of Button right here. I'm going to click and drag Button all the way over here to Object and Let Go. Notice it says Button. Now, what we also just saw is this little menu just changed. So I'm going to click on this, no function, come down to NavigateMenu, notice the name of the script, and then scroll down to switch scene and in parentheses string. Now, because this method accepts a parameter, we can tell it what its argument is, which is to say, when we click this button on click, it will call this script in that method and allow us to add it, to send something to it. We're going to send it credits. So notice right here, I've matched this to this so that when the user clicks credit, it loads the credit scene, which doesn't quite exist yet, but we'll go ahead and do this. Okay. So now we're all done with this. And then over here, by the way, notice this little asterisk tells us that this scene is not saved. So over here, and again, just like I did in Visual Studio, I want to save this scene. So we can go to File, Save, Control S, or we could have also just pressed Control S to do it as well, or Command S on Mac. Okay. I want to add another scene. So there are, of course, at least two different ways to do this. But down here in Scenes, notice I have this folder down here in Project. I'm going to double click to open it, and I notice I have Sample Scene. Sample Scene is what I'm looking at right here. Sample Scene, Sample Scene. I want to add a new scene. So just like we added a new game object in the hierarchy view, there are, of course, at least two different ways to creating new assets within the project view. So I'm going to use a little plus drop down right here. I've got a whole bunch of different options. But I want to keep moving until I find scene right here. Scene, click on it. So we've added a new scene. I'm going to click on this in its name and call this credits. And press enter when I'm done. So now we have, notice down here, credits.unity. This is a new scene. So now I'm going to move away from sample scene and I'm going to open the credits scene. And I can do that through double clicking on credits from the project view. Notice right here, the hierarchy view changed because it doesn't have any game objects, only sample scene does, the default scene created by Unity. So now we want to add something to credits. So let's take a pretty similar approach to what we did with sample scene, which is say, let's go ahead and create some new text. So right here, go down to UI, text. Let's again, we'll make this a little bigger, drag in right here. And let's make this again, say 85 this time. Make it a lot bigger. Adjust this a little bit. Left click to drag this around to the way we want it. Double click over here, game preview. Okay, next text. That looks pretty good. But this is credits, right? All this credits. Okay. So this is all set right here. There we go. Make sure everything looks about right. Credits. Okay, that looks about good. Now notice this has a little asterisk telling us that this hasn't been saved. So let's go ahead and save this. File, save. So we've saved this scene. Now let's move back to sample scene. So I'm going to double click sample scene within the scenes in the project view. Now we're back at sample scene and notice it closed it all for us, but there was canvas, text button, and it says game menu over here. Now I'm going to go ahead and run this, but I'm going to let everybody know there's going to be an error immediately. So let's go ahead and run this. Okay, now I want to click on credits and I want to move to the credit scene. Oops, an error happened. Notice it down here in red. Come over here in the console and see what this says. This says scene credits couldn't be loaded because it has not been added to the build settings or to the asset bundle has not been loaded. Add a scene to the build settings, use the menu file build settings. Okay, let's go ahead and stop this from running. And let's follow this directions. It said go to File, Build Settings, File, Build Settings. Oh, whoa, there we go. Scenes in Build. There's no scenes here. So this was a little bit confused, right? And it said, hey, you attempted to include something and I didn't know what it was. So over here in Project View, let's make sure we've got scenes open. Let's drag in. So click right here, drag over here, Sample Scene. and then click on credits and drag it over here to credits. So now we've added 2 different scenes to a build. Now, if we wanted to select other platforms, we could also arrange different scenes for those builds, but for right now, I'm just using this PC, Mac, and Linux standalone. And so now that this is all set up, let's go ahead and exit out of build settings. So now, if I re-click this to play, if I click on credits, we see credits. So notice over here, we moved over here, this hierarchy view in the editor shows credits, right? And if we stop it, we move back to game menu, which is where we originally started. Okay. So far, we have one scene called sample scene, which has a button, which we can click on to load a new scene. And when we load a new scene, we move to credits. Well, most games have the ability to move from one menu to another and then back again. So we need to now add a button to the credits scene and then set up all of its interactions so we can move back to the game scene. So let's do that next. I'm going to double click on the credits right here, this scene, open this up, we've got credits. Let's go ahead and add a button to this as well. So again, down, UI, button, right here. So similar steps. I'm going to right here, change its text from button to return to menu. Right here. Then with button selected, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Just play with this a little bit. Okay, very good. Now over here in project view, I'm going to come down to assets and I've still got that navigate menu script. Instead of creating a new script, I'm going to click on navigate script and drag it over here to the inspector view and let it go underneath add component to add the navigate menu script component to this game object. Just like I did previously using the sample scene and its button, I'm going to, under here on the OnClick, right here, and then the inspector view, click on the plus sign, and then again it says object. So I'm going to click and drag the button over here for object. I'm going to click on this. I'm going to go down to navigate menu, go down to switch scene. This time, however, instead of navigating to credits, I want to navigate to sample scene. Because sample scene is the name of the default scene it created, which we can verify by reopening scenes in the project view and realizing this is called sample scene, sample-scene.unity, sample scene. Okay. So if everything is right, we should be able to start with game menu or with the credit scene, and clicking buttons on either one, move to either scene. So let's see if we've got this configured correctly. Over here, notice a little asterisk telling us this is unsaved. Let's go save this, file, save. Okay, now let's start up using credits. And we should be able to return to menu. Game menu, credits, game menu, credits, game menu, credits, game menu, credits. And stop. And it will stop us at whatever scene we previously had open. And we can navigate over here to sample scene. Well, this is all well and good, but I don't think sample scene is actually a very good name for what this scene does. This scene is more like a game menu than it is a sample scene. So let's change the name of sample scene. So I can right click on sample scene, go down to rename. Let's just call this menu, right? That's kind of what it is, and click enter. It says, hey, if you want to reload this, let's click reload. Okay. So now menu up here, and all it did was just close this for us. We can still see it says the same thing. It still says game menu, and we've got one button going to credits. Oh, okay, but we need to double check something, because in the other scene in credits, in its button, we were going to sample scene, which no longer exists. So let's reopen credits. Over here, click on its button, come down here and change sample scene to menu. Right here. The menu matches the scene we wanted over here. And again, this needs to be saved. So file, save. Let's run this from credits. Return to menu, game menu, return to menu, game menu, stop. So what is going on behind the scenes? Well, this script over here is just taking in whatever scene name we give it. which matches any of the scenes we have. As long as there's a scene with a name, we can navigate to it and use the SceneManager.LoadScene, so the load scene method of the SceneManager object, to navigate to that scene. We just tell it the scene we want, and it navigates to it. And we just use this switch scene right here as part of this, and this very simple NavigateMenu script that is shared across multiple scenes, and in fact could be shared across anything we wanted to use it. We just add it as a script component to that game object, especially for buttons. Add a new action for the OnClick, associate a game object, in this case the same thing it is, and then enable that method. Or right here, notice we drug over button right here, went to navigate menu, went to switch scene, and then told it right here the string we wanted to load matching the exact name of the scene right here that we wanted to load. So this has been kind of a long video reviewing how to use menus and scene navigation. In particular, I created a navigate menu script and I shared it across scenes and created some different game objects in 2 different scenes and was able to use buttons to load between them, then change the name of the scene, and then change the name of the scene that was loaded based on whatever argument we were sending to that method. Somewhat complicated perhaps, but easy to get into of creating a new scene, reusing an existing script if we want to, and then navigating to different scenes within a greater overall project, each scene having their own game objects and doing their own thing.